Is it possible to have an ice age while in a greenhouse Earth?
It depends a bit on how you're using the term ice age, and in general, many aspects of this question can get a bit lost in terminology as the term ice age ends up having slightly different connotations depending on who is using it.
Sometimes, ice age refers to a relatively long period of lower than average temperatures and buildup and persistence of relatively large continental ice sheets and alpine glaciers, and during an ice age, that there are shorter fluctuations between minima and maxima of temperature and inversely related ice volumes, i.e., glacial and interglacial periods that are typically correlated to, and driven by, Milankovitch cycles. This is effectively how Wikipedia defines an ice age, but sometimes in the literature you will see ice age as a term used effectively as a synonym for glacial periods, for example, Ching et al., 2009. A less ambiguous set of terms effectively considers that there are three broad states of the climate: icehouse, greenhouse, and hothouse, for example.
Kidder-Worsley, 2010, Kidder-Worsley, 2012, where distribution of ice is part of the but importantly, not the only criteria for identifying which state a particular portion of Earth history is in, with generally icehouse implying large and persistent continental ice sheets, greenhouse implying either seasonal polar ice, a warm greenhouse, or persistent, but relatively small polar ice sheets, a cool greenhouse, and hothouse implying no polar ice and likely effectively no alpine glaciers, etc.
Now, if we take ice age to be a synonym for an icehouse state as the Wikipedia definition does, for example, and returning to the question, then no, you cannot have an ice age during a greenhouse state because, by definition, these are different. If we instead consider an ice age to be a glacial period like how it's used in Cheng et al. And other papers sometimes, which we would usually think about in terms of interglacial glacial cycles during an icehouse, then the answer gets a bit tricky.
Formally, I'm not aware of people using glacial interglacial cycle terminology to describe waxing and waning ice sheet sizes during a greenhouse state, but there are reasons to think that there would be such a behavior. Specifically, Milankovitch cycles don't cease to exist simply because the Earth is in a greenhouse or hothouse state, so there would still be the periodic variation in the amount of solar radiation reaching the Earth, which should in turn impart periodic temperature variations.
In detail, there are reconstructed sea level fluctuations during greenhouse states, for example, the late Cretaceous, that some have argued may reflect growing and shrinking ice sheets, effectively something akin to glacial interglacial behavior we see during the Cenozoic, an icehouse state, for example, Miller et al., 2005. Now, whether these sea level fluctuations are dominantly caused by growing and shrinking ice sheets remains contentious, with other plausible mechanisms having been proposed, for example,
fluctuations in groundwater storage, among others, for example, Hawk, 2014, Sames et al., 2016. Uncertainty aside, if we accept that an ice age implies something akin to a glacial period and that such variations in ice volume still happen during a greenhouse state, then the answer could be yes, but probably requires stretching the way we use these terms a bit. TL Doctor, the question largely rests on the way you define certain terms and a little bit on actual behavior.
If you consider ice age to be synonymous with an icehouse state in the context of there being three broad climate states for Earth, i.e., icehouse, greenhouse, and hothouse states, then by definition, an ice age cannot happen during a greenhouse state.
If you instead consider an ice age to refer to a glacial period within interglacial glacial cycles, then during greenhouse states, especially cooler ones, there might be persistent enough polar ice sheets that grow and shrink that you could consider there to be glacial periods and correspondingly interglacial periods during a greenhouse, but you have to probably be a bit loose with the usage of the terms for this to really apply.
Additionally, if you're reading this and curious about the mechanisms related to transitions between interglacial glacial periods during an icehouse or transitions between icehouse, greenhouse, and hothouse states, I'd suggest this fact entry as a starting place.